one of the healthy fears that parents should have is raising a child that will be successful at something that doesn't really matter. So fear is part of the parenting equation. Question is, how do you manage it? If I know there's a way to overcome my fear because I see it in you, I see that you have been successful, then that gives me hope. This idea that parents who have really a great family, that somehow it's just a matter of good genes, when it's not. It's just hard work.
Yes, we all want to be friends with our children, but that's our relational goal. It isn't our starting point.
We definitely want you to enjoy your children as moms and dads, but more importantly, or equally as important, we want other people to enjoy your children.
Well, Julie, let's start this episode off with a story.
Love story time.
So we're going to go back to the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, Greece. Matthew Emmons, an American air rifle competitor, he's competing in the 3-position event in which participants shoot from their stomachs, their knees, and their feet at a target 50 meters away. So he's on track for the gold medal in this event, and he's coming up for his final shot. He's so far ahead of all the other competitors that all he has to do is place his bullet anywhere in the inner ring of the target to win the gold medal.
Not even a bullseye.
Not even a bullseye. He just has to hit the target in the ring.
Okay.
So he can't hit outside the ring, but inside the ring, and he wins the gold medal. So the bullet passes right through the bullseye.
Wow.
However, he's puzzled because the tone doesn't go off when he hits the bullseye. And usually, whenever you hit the bullseye,
It's like a ding or
there's a
sound
ding or a sound that goes off. And at that moment, he realized that the bullseye he hit was on the wrong target.
Oh.
It was on the target next to him. And with that one shot, hitting the wrong target, one lane over, he got no score at all on that shot, and he dropped from first place gold medal to 8th place.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts. That hurts. Just to give a little caveat, he's actually won a lot of gold medals in other Olympics. I read up on his story because I felt bad for him. But yes, and that one time, very devastating.
So see, the right shot hitting the wrong target. Which is worse, failure or succeeding at the wrong thing?
Yeah. I think about that often with parenting because parenting can be a very fearful thing. I think about what I'm doing, my labor, and am I hitting the right targets? Or is my labor going towards the right target, or am I hitting bullseye and totally the wrong target? I think about that often. And it's overwhelming to think about all the things that I want to accomplish as I raise my children.
Yeah. It's good to be with you guys today. Rich Young and Julie Young here. And we're excited to have Gary and Anne-Marie Ezzos with us, founders of Growing Families. And we're going to share a little bit about that. We're going to share about the current, the present, the past, and the future, and break down some of those fears that sometimes we've experienced and that we see others experiencing, and how to overcome those and move forward to some hope for the future. So Gary, what you got thought to share around that as we open things up?
Well, I have heard that story one other time, and I was moved this time as much as I was the first time hearing the conclusion, even though I knew the conclusion, because it generates emotions when it comes to hitting the wrong target when you thought you were so well on track. I know that one of the probably one of the fears that would be helpful, actually, let me back up. Let me just say there's two types of fear. There is the fear that generates a healthy respect. I'm not going to go by myself near a wolf pack because I have a healthy fear, but that's going to keep me safe. But then
that's the animal, not the university, right?
Not university.
Right, okay.
That's the university,
Okay.
right? Thank you for that clarification.
Exactly.
Especially since we're coming out of basketball season. However, there is that fear that prevents me from taking the next step, that fear that causes confusion and I don't know where to go. Sometimes that fear interplays with just our sense of what is best for our children. I know I often think about it because we wrote about this in our Life in the Middle Years series, that probably one of the biggest fears, the healthy fears that parents should have, is raising a child that will be successful at something that doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, there are investments that parents put into their children to help them achieve something, but what they are achieving is not the best for the child or their future. So when we talk about fear, we all have them. We have there's generational fear. There's personal fear, that baggage that we bring in, the fear that we bring into a relationship. So fear, unfortunately, but in realism, is part of the parenting equation. The question is, how do you manage it?
Well, let's talk maybe just for a few minutes on what do you think are some of the pressing issues of today that parents and families are having to work through? What are some things that we may be able to work through in this session here to help them move a little bit past that?
Well, if we can pick up on the issue of fear, I'm trying to think, particularly from a mother's perspective and in this day and age. From what I am gleaning from a lot of the young moms that I work with is they're just so fearful of messing up, of wanting to do the right thing.
So fear of failure.
Basically it's fear of failure and just not what if I do this and my child doesn't end up liking me, or what if I do this and they think that any mistake that they make even early on in their parenting is going to have an impact on them for the rest of the life. Now there could be some things that could happen, but usually some of those things that we are so fearful of, like what if I don't understand my baby's cry cues, or what if my toddler wants to do something and I don't, and he gets all upset? Those are kind of things that what's going to happen to them, and so it actually paralyzes. Young moms.
I'm wondering if in this cancel culture, we're afraid our kids will cancel us.
That very well could be. I mean, seriously.
We want friendship with our children so badly, sometimes way too early.
Right.
And we're afraid they'll cancel us as their friend and go off. Yeah.
And that is scary. I mean, one thing we have shared for years now with parents is, yes, we all want to be friends with our children. But that's our relational goal. It isn't our starting point because we're parents.
Right.
And even though you might go into your parenting thinking, I've never really had any experience with a baby. I don't know what to do. Your baby doesn't know that. So as long as you're making sure your baby gets fed regularly, you're changing their diaper, you're cuddling them, they don't know any difference.
Right. Kids want to be led, and they want to be led well. Mm-hmm. They may have a love-hate relationship with it. They may push back on it.
This is true.
But a lot of them, they're just, so where is the line? I know I was that kid. So where's the line?
What does that look like, though, leading them well? You say that. I mean, what are some things that come to mind when you think of leading your children, your families well? What are a couple of things that as parents we can be doing that may seem a little bit like out of the mix compared to what people are talking about, but that will lead a desired result that's really, really exciting down the road?
You know what? For me personally, I always go back to the fundamentals. Look at the generation that's just a little bit ahead of you, that mom and dad who might have, if you have the 5-year-old, you're looking at the mom and dad with the 10-year-old, with the 15-year-old. Look and see what you like. then ask the question, tell me, help me understand, what did you do in order to get this, to get to this goal, to get to this place? Because if I know there's a way to overcome my fear because I see it in you, I see that you have been successful, then that gives me hope. I want to pursue then your course of action. If I really want that outcome, then I'm going to follow you. I'm going to listen to you. So I think one of the compensators for fear is hope. Where do you get your hope? I get my hope by looking at those who have gone before me, and then deciding, this is what I want.
Yeah, that's good.
And listening to what they have to say, because sometimes, especially, well, it's always been this way. There's just more information out there now than there ever has been before. But it could very well be countercultural from what you're seeing is happening all around you. But like you said, Gare, compare, okay? You see this family with, depending on where you are in your parenting, they're enjoying their children and their child is enjoying them. So I do want to listen as compared to this family. They're like, I can hardly wait till school starts up again so I can send them back. Or,
they're not enjoying their kids.
They're not enjoying their kids. So what do you want? And
fear, if I may also add, honey, and I think you and I have experienced, so I know you guys too, just in the relationships and working through with young couples who are struggling with fear. Fear tends to do one of two things. Either it causes me not to do anything.
So paralyzes you.
Basically, yeah.
Or I become the parent that's going to try everything.
Yeah.
And as a result, because I'm trying everything simply means I'm going to be inconsistent I'm going to move from this formula to this formula to this formula to this.
It's like popcorn parenting.
And basically, that's exactly what it is. And what ends up happening is as a mom and dad, you're going to make things worse for yourself and for your child because you're not following any conviction. Which would be better than following every conviction. It is paralyzing, and that's why I really encourage moms and dads. We encourage moms and dads, look to those families that have produced the type of children, and then understand this is a countercultural concept. They're not just lucky.
Say that 10 times.
Yeah.
Cultural
concept. They are not just lucky. You are not looking at a family who just got a genetic strand of really good kids. You're looking at a family who put a lot of work in. They had a vision. They knew where they wanted to go. They applied principles that got them to that conclusion. And so they worked really hard. Yeah. And we find this to be consistent, Rich, that through each generation, and we've been through 3 of them now, that this idea that parents who have really a great family with children that everyone enjoys, not just mom and dad, that somehow it's just a matter of good genes, when it's not. It's just hard work.
So you're encouraging parents is to go find an influencer.
Yeah.
But a good influence. I think that because I think one of the sources of confusion and fear for parents, and I'm just going to say especially moms, it seems like women are on social media more than men. And not always, but
it's probably accurate.
The confusion comes because there are so many influencers. And once they find out you have a toddler, when I say you, I say social media, however that happens, you will be targeted with all sorts of reels and information that have to do with the age of child you have. Now that we're grandparents and getting all these things, all the good grandmas are buying their kids this and doing this. Yeah. So there's
You look way too young to be a grandmother.
Thank you, darling. There's all sorts of information. There's all sorts of influence coming to them through the phone, and that just makes it so confusing. And so pick your influencer and be really intentional about who is going to influence them.
And realize that your influencer really can be in 3D, meaning it's a real person.
Yeah, really? We can do that?
Yeah, and that you're looking for that family. And it might be in the church. It might be in the school that you're associated with. It might even be someone just in your friend community. But find that couple. Look and ask the questions, pursue them. Because if that's what you want, that's your hope. Because if you follow everyone else, you're not going to get to where you want to be.
You're going to hit the wrong target.
So we're going to bounce back. You mentioned 3 generations that you've been working with. We're going to bounce back to the first generation in a minute. But there's another topic I want to throw out and just talk a little bit about. There's a lot of parents today that feel the pressure of getting it all done before that kid hits the teen years, because they feel like once the kid hits the teen years that they just won't have that relationship with them anymore. So they've got this, what they think is like a 10-year window to get everything in. And there's that urge to press and really go hard after it because they just feel like it's not going to be there after that and will never be the same. Let's talk about that a little bit and some things that really are not true about that. And then what are some things they can do to prevent and have to push so hard for that short season when really it should be a much longer timeline that we're working on here, right?
It's a lifetime. It really is.
It is, although I do understand the urgency because that's the time period where they're under our roof. And we do have a lot of influence in their lives. I like to think that my goal is to be able to influence my children throughout until I am no longer of this earth.
Right.
Realistically, the influence may be less as they're at college and the workplace are living near. So I understand the urgency. However, having a vision that our influence does not end at age 18, age 20, whatever, we may have this mental block that is not true.
Yeah, or even as you were alluding to, Rich, that even by the time they reach their teens. I mean, and that's the lie that unfortunately too many parents believe that, well, once they become teenagers, we might as well hang it up because if we've not achieved this goal by then.
We said it 3 generations ago, 2 generations ago, we still say it today. The teen years can be and should be some of the best years of the parent-child relationship. Those are the years that you're looking forward to, not dreading. Those are the years that you should be filled with excitement because all that you can do relationally with them. And we also talk about, and you guys have done such a great job, in the authority to influence transition that facilitates this. And basically what that says is when children come into the home, these babies, young toddlers, preschoolers, they do not have the world of knowledge that you have. They don't understand health and safety concerns. They do not understand necessarily the way we treat people and how values and virtues play a role in how we're going to respond and care for people. You have all of that knowledge as a mom and dad, but the children don't. So lead them by your being the person of influence, and that does include the authority that you have. The authority that is granted to you is not like a legal authority. It is the authority of knowledge. It's the authority of maturity, of moral maturity. And with that, you're guiding them, leading them. So if 2 siblings are squabbling, by your authority, you're going to go in and you're going to begin to teach them how not to squabble. You know, you're going to restore who took the toy, who didn't take the toy, who's going to apologize, who's not. We do that when they're young. But as they are growing, as moms and dads are putting more and more virtues and values into their heart, and it's becoming a way of life for them, that's part of the whole life message. As it becomes a way of life for them, we gradually, in the middle years, between 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 years of age, we begin to transition to leading them no longer by our authority, but by our influence. We needed the authority to establish the moral consciousness of the child. Once that's there, we no longer need all that authority. Now we lead by our relational influence. And as you were saying, Julie, then that relational influence is carried throughout life. It doesn't stop, well, they're 18, okay, it's over. But in fact, it carries through. And if parents don't make that transition, that's when they have trouble in the teen years, because they're still trying to rule a child when, in fact, authoritative ruling should have been replaced by influential guidance.
Yeah, these aren't hard stops. These are like ebb and flows that occur. Right. So it's not like, boom, you get to a hard stop and then you just flip the switch. It's kind of like this transition that ebbs and flows, like the tide coming in and out. something like that.
And isn't it often that parents want to be friends with their kids when they're toddlers, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they think this is going so well, and then it starts not going so well. And then they become teenagers, and then they slam down with authority because, wait, this friendship thing, because we haven't established the moral authority.
Yeah. I'm doing research right now for another presentation that speaks quite heavily in the arena of brain development, frontal lobe development. And every researcher that I've come across so far have presented an argument against being friends with your children early on.
Wow.
About setting up guidelines, setting up boundaries, setting up expectations, making sure you follow through them. Most of them even come out, and I'm dealing with secular research, are coming out with avoid permissive parenting, avoid this whole idea that you could be a friend with your child right
Sounds
now.
like a podcast in itself. Mark that down.
Yeah.
We need to have them back, and let's talk about that for a whole session.
But the point is, what they're saying is, even the developing brain of a child is seeking after boundaries, is seeking after a routine, is seeking after mommy and daddy being mommy and daddy. There'll be time to be a friend, but right now I need you to be mom and dad because your job is to guide me and to protect me, keep me healthy, keep me safe, and give me what I need for life.
And give me the opportunity to become a teenager.
Yes, exactly. And since I know your heart and what you mean, I want to make sure that this is clear. We still enjoy our children. We still
absolutely.
have giggles with them. We still tickle fights. We still play games. I know your heart, but I just don't want people to hear that, no, we can't we can't have fun, friendly times with them. We still do have that, but we're still the authority.
Children have a deep, deep love and appreciation naturally for their parents. They don't grow hostile to mom and dad leading and guiding them. So the idea that we could have fun with our kids is only enhanced by the fact that we are still mommy and daddy, because that means even more to a child that I'm having fun with mom and dad than I'm having fun with just two older people who are saying they're my friends.
They're really old, though.
I think we need to break out a couple of cold glasses of milk and some warm chocolate chip cookies. It seems like that's what we need right now, a little moment. So let's go back a few generations. We were talking a little earlier before we started this just about some of the issues that were going on back then. So the fear of the teen years, wanting to be friends, the husband-wife relationship were three that we were talking about. So why don't we just, drop back a few decades here, about 40 years ago when you started this, those were kind of the things that were pressing back then. Talk about those back then, and then we'll move into the future a little bit.
Yeah, because I think as a parent now, I'm like, it must have been so easy. There was no social media. I mean, how easy did you guys have it?
There were still issues back then.
I know. Yeah. And that's the key for probably every single generation, even the ones preceding us, even though there's not all the same that we have today. For that generation and for us, those were still big issues.
Right.
There's always something, like whether it's Nintendo or how much TV do I allow my child to watch, or how many hours a week do my children allow? What kind of friends should they have? The other thing I was thinking about too, about the past, and this will be a positive change that we've seen over the years, is back when we were first beginning our parenting, and it was a carryover from the previous generation, very much roles were kind of defined. Mom, you stay home, you watch the kids, that's your job. Dad goes off to work, I'm providing a paycheck, I'm doing my job. So there was very little, it's not, I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but there was very little dad involvement.
Society in general.
And in general, right. You'd take family vacations and dad would be a little bit more involved. And usually kids would say, oh, this was kind of neat to have this time with dad.
Yeah.
But then he goes back to work and things are the same as they were before. So having encouraged, part of the drum that we beat is that dad should be involved from the very beginning. He's a very important part. He just doesn't start this child. He's involved in the child's.
That's very valid, because we grew up in a period of time. Not that we're going to litigate those years, but we grew up in a period of time where really society assign roles. So you had the mother role, mothers did certain things. You had the father role, fathers did certain things. And the generation that we began to influence began to understand we don't need to stay within those identified roles. But it's just like today. Today, there's all kinds of strange identifiable roles where dad's not supposed to be involved in the life of the baby until the baby is at least 2 years old. Or mom is in charge of everything. We still, no, as you said, honey, dads need to be involved with that little person from day one. And he needs to be holding that baby, hugging that baby, feeding that baby when he can. He needs to be part of the entire team, because that child's one of his greatest needs is to know my dad, an influencer in my life, was there from the beginning. And he didn't just step into my life when I turned 3, but he was there from the beginning. That's an important transition.
It is. And I think you're speaking to dads, but also to moms, because it can be, I remember having this child and I was the one nursing the baby. That wasn't something you can do. Sorry, hon. But
there's truth to that statement.
But I remember there was almost this sense of like, I carried the baby, I'm feeding the baby. It wasn't that like it's mine, but it was, I could have had a very protective, no, I'm the mom. This is my part. I'll let you know when the child's ready to hit a baseball in the backyard type of thought. So as moms, we need to when the husband says, why don't you pump a bottle and let me feed? Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
You cuddle and hold that baby.
Yeah.
And you did that a lot. So thank you.
But I think that's part of the positive message. I mean, I know that, you started out with the old preparation for parenting, but that was part of the message. Dad needs to be involved from the beginning. So, but back to the original, the fear that if I let him into this world, he's going to mess something up is counterproductive, because he could mess a whole bunch of things up, because we dads are really good at that. However, the benefits,
that's what we're around to fix things.
That's right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
The benefits that are achieved by the presence of an active dad, a loving father, and a loving husband in that same process is far greater than maybe the few things we might get wrong,
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say it isn't so much that you get things wrong. You just maybe do it differently.
Different, yeah.
So it's a matter of thinking, this is going to help.
So we let the baby crawl out in the garden.
Is that a problem?
It's like aerating it.
That's right.
That's right.
You just give them that.
Well, I think of that too, because very often husbands and wives come together and have different strengths. And until I think we understood each other's strengths and weaknesses, I would look at you and go, why don't you have the same strengths I do? But I appreciated your strengths that I didn't have. And so once we came to an understanding
Can you say that again?
temperaments and our differences. And so one of my strengths maybe is, being able to keep on a schedule or organized, or, we have a plan and we can stick to the plan. But you're really good at making sure, so I can make sure the vacation is going, we have a place to stay and we know where we're going to get this and the house we're going to stay at, whatever. But you're really good, like, let's make sure this is a really fun and memorable time. And that's such a great balance, because I think they're both, it's not real fun if you don't have a place to stay or a way to get there, or all the details aren't ironed out. So we've kind of learned our strengths and weaknesses, where, his like spontaneous, let's go do this, it'll be so much fun. I'm like, it's not in the plan.
That's right.
And so that give and take and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses. And that's just one example on vacation, but in parenting in general.
Every week.
I think there's a lot of things that I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. I'm not good at that. Go.
And especially in general. I mean, I know we're kind of focusing a little bit on the parenting part, but this whole point is so critical in the husband and wife relationship. And the sooner the couples that are listening can grasp that there's things that brought you together because you appreciated that uniqueness that was there. But now our role is to develop that in one another. But I know we even still will have conversations. It's kind of like, why don't you think like me? And it's like, if we both thought the same way, it might not be good.
I think what alleviates fear from moms is to know dad's on the same page. We may not do things exactly the same way. We may not see things exactly the same way. But if we're on the same page in terms of what we want to accomplish, we're on the same page as it relates to the process, that eliminates, at least drastically reduces the fear that a mother or even a father will have, just knowing, I'm not alone in this. We're doing this with full knowledge as team players. And that's one of the greatest assets.
Dad's also validating in front of their wife and their kids what their wife did.
Yes.
What she said, the approach that she took, and backing her up and approving that is huge.
Same with wives doing that.
To husbands, exactly.
Yeah, because the kids recognize that's not the way mommy does it. And so they're looking at mommy going, are you going to get mad at daddy? Or is this okay?
Yeah. And going back to, I forget which episode it was now, the couch time, the number one.
That's number one.
If you're running out of conversation topics, this is a good one to discuss during your couch time.
Oh,
being
peanut
on
butter
the
and
same
jelly
page.
sandwiches. So I would only eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as a kid. If mom put ham and cheese in my lunch, I would trade it out for some kid who did have peanut butter and jelly. But when I
How
watched...
many years did you do that for?
A lot.
Are you talking 5+?
I mean, all grade school, maybe even into middle school.
That's at least 3 years.
But anyway, mom made peanut butter and jelly. She put the peanut butter on one piece of bread, the jelly on the other piece of bread, and then you bring them together. When my daddy would make me a sandwich, he put the peanut butter on the bread, then the jelly on top of the peanut butter, and then the bread on top. It tasted very different. I could not eat it.
So, Anne Marie, when you make peanut butter and jelly, do you do it on each piece of bread, or do you do it on one piece of bread? How do you do it?
I actually will do both sometimes. So
Very flexible.
Yeah, I'm very flexible.
I'm traditional.
Which one is that?
I'm bread and bread.
Bread and bread.
You can't.
I bring up that story because I remember telling my mom the first time I watched my dad make my peanut butter and jelly sandwich that way. I was like, Mom, did you know Daddy doesn't know how
What
to
are we
make
going to do about
peanut
this?
butter and jelly sandwiches? You need to have a talk with him. And I remember my mom saying, it really doesn't matter. It tastes the same. I was like, no, it doesn't. But just my mom affirming it's okay to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches
like that.
I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
You're putting me in a tough position. How do you transition off that?
I know.
I mean,
It's a little insight into Julie, huh?
I know. I do remember that story, but it hasn't been told in many, many years. So it's a benefit of having this type of setting. Stuff comes out.
All the skeletons come out of the closet.
Yeah.
And we'll have to have a date night and talk about that at some point in the future. Let's talk about the future. That's what we're going to transition to. And what hope looks like. Hope looks like for parents that are parenting their children, whether you have teens right now, you have toddlers, or you're pregnant and you're going to have your first coming into this world. What are some thoughts you guys have on the hope for the future of parenting and families?
If I may.
Oh, please.
Well, it's actually so complex in one sense. Again, I know we're talking future, but let me just step back just a little bit, back those 40 years. We entered into a society that had a far greater moral consensus as a nation. Collectively had a collective moral consensus. It wasn't perfect, but we all agreed on what fairness looked like. We all agreed on what graciousness looked like, what honesty looked like, what respect looked like. So there was this consensus. And that meant that we all placed the same value on these individual virtues that held society together. So I think one of the greatest challenges as we speak to the future is, as a society, at least a U.S. society, we have lost that moral consensus. Our definitions and the amount of value that we place on these same virtues are all over the board. And that has led to an incredible amount of confusion. That confusion fuels fear. But on the other hand, we step back from 40 years to this very present day. The one thing that we can take joy in the graciousness of God is to look at the worldwide GFI community that has a complete collective moral consensus. And so if someone's battling with fear, but looking for hope, hope is found in this moral consensus. Hope is found in moms and dads who are trying to raise children that have a sense of otherness, a child that's strong in empathy, a child that understands the virtues of Christ, a child that understands the life message. Well, all of those elements make up this collective moral consensus. And within the GFI society, the GFI multinational society, you will find that. You don't find massive deviations from the fundamental core values, because what has made all those parents successful is the larger moral consensus of the larger community. And for me, that's real hope for a generation that's battling various societies that has no consistency or no consistency of values.
And just to clarify, GFI is growing families.
Yes.
Growing families. Thank you very much. Growing families.
Yes.
Yeah, it's international. It's not something. It's international in the title, but actually, technically, it's a multinational. There's a difference. It's a multinational organization. And even though multinational, the like-mindedness within each one of these nations, it's the same.
Emery, what's one of the things that would be similar? Like if you were to pick out a topic that would be very similar between nations. Just to give an example of one.
Well, we'll put the husband and wife aside, but I think the preciousness of others. I think that is something that as I think through all the various countries and nationalities that the Lord has allowed this ministry to grow in, is that whole concept of teaching your children the preciousness of others is something that echoes with the parents, no matter where we are, whether it's South Africa, Europe, Brazil, Singapore, China.
I remember going to Brazil to their conference with the two of you. It was our very first time in Brazil. We took our oldest two. I think they were about 11 and 9 years old. And then Micah was a baby. He was like 9 weeks old. That was fun, getting a passport for a newborn. But so we're there with those three children. And so we sent our 11 and 9-year-old to play with the other Brazilian children. Our children do not know Portuguese. The Brazilian children, some of them were learning English in school, so they knew some, but
most didn't, though.
But they're still pretty young. Their English was not expansive, and they're now going to play together. And it was just so neat watching children from different cultures, different language, but with the same moral values, play together. And, they figure out sign language and games, and I think they ended up playing freeze tag, which that's just a game that transcends all languages, but the preciousness of others, and each kid going up to their parent and doing the interrupt courtesy when they wanted to, when they wanted their parents' attention, they weren't going up doing this, as is taught in the Growing Kids and Tree of Life and a lot of the Growing Families material. And so I remember our kids seeing that and just they felt. They were in a completely different culture, different language, but they were in the same culture.
Exactly. And I think that's probably the other thing, too, as far as how we think about life is so important in developing that like-mindedness that's there. And
how do you think the advantages today, honey? When we started that first community, they didn't have the multicultural or multinational community, a broader community. Today, the parents stepping into the Growing Families arena, they are now stepping into a multinational community of like-mindedness, where the respect is viewed as the same, where the courtesies are viewed as the same, where the virtues are viewed as the same. And there is something about stepping into a broader life community that encourages us more than brings fear into our hearts. We feel hopeful as a result of it.
So let me ask a question. This sounds good. I want into this community. Do I have to apply and pay dues to get in? How did I get in?
It's probably not the best way to do it, but it's an option we might want to consider.
We only have one membership fee. And that membership fee is a heart that's willing to learn for the sake of your own children. But also we do believe strongly in each parent bringing something to contribute to society. And what they are bringing to contribute to society is a child that is morally healthy and certainly morally productive, because that's one of the greatest assets that any society can have, is an honest child who will eventually become a leader in their community in some capacity, simply because they possess the qualifications that are necessary for them to be a strong leader that is respected by those who will come after them, who will follow them. So there's no membership fee except a willing heart to learn.
Yeah.
I also think, too, there's got to be more of a desire for parents to lead their families, wanting to grow, wanting to lean in and get better, and making that a priority and discuss it that way with your family, your kids. Mm-hmm. And then also, once you do that and you're on that track, a desire to share with others. Because I think now in today's world, it's like, once I have something, it's like you don't want to let anyone else know. Because I was talking to someone the other day and they were asking, he was saying, hey, I want to buy a house on the water. And he said, there's only 6 lots there left. And I said, well, where's that at? He goes, I'm not going to tell you, because then you might go buy one. And I said, well, I'm not in the market. But it was today's world of, he didn't want to tell me because his fear of me going and getting it beforehand, scarcity mindset. I think us as parents, once we grow and we move and we learn, we should have the desire to share with others, to bring them along and give them the same opportunity to have the same excitement that we're experiencing. And I think we're losing a little bit of that today, of that sharing what we have because there's a fear someone else might pass us. Well, we should be excited if someone else does it better than us, if we were part of that equation.
Well, I know we're excited just sitting at this table with you. I mean, because...
Well, that gets me excited.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you talk about, and that's what you want, even for your own children. You want them to exceed. I mean, that was, in quotes, the American dream, for my grandparents, yours, probably yours as well. They immigrated here to the United States in the hopes of giving their children a better future. Every parenting generation should want that for their children, and not just in a monetary way.
Right.
But I mean, for us as believers, our desire was been that our children would exceed us in the faith. And so,
on our shoulders. Yeah.
And you guys have so beautifully demonstrated that in just your parenting and your leadership, and your compassion and love for everyone who wants to do better as it relates to raising healthy, morally responsible and biblically responsive children.
Thank you. And thank you for all the Growing Families resources. I wanted to point people to those. There's online classes, there's videos on the website, there's books. You talk about being a part of this community and, well, how do I even understand what that looks like? Mm-hmm. And that's what understanding the principles, and they're all God's principles, right, of how to raise children that have sure been an encouragement to us.
And just picking up on that one little comment that you made about wanting to share it with others. And I think, at least, well, I think for both of us, but even as a mom way, way back in the beginning, before we ever knew what God was going to do with our lives, just as a young couple. I mean, I did enjoy being a mom. I didn't have all the answers. I still don't have all the answers. But in seeing the couples that were coming behind us that were not so much enjoying their children. But if you're going to have a child, we want them to be the blessing that God intended them to be and to enjoy them. And so that enjoyment, that excitement that we had, even with the lack of knowledge of exactly how we were getting there, we wanted to help others to be able to enjoy their children.
Your statement, though, reminds me of one of our earliest fundamental premises, which stated, we definitely want you to enjoy your children as moms and dads. But more importantly, or equally as important, we want other people to enjoy your children. And we would continually put that before our audience. And that gets back to, there's a social obligation that we have to contribute to our society to make it better. And if I can contribute to our society, children who understand the value that's associated with respecting age, the value that's associated with being kind, the value that's associated with being honest, that we're contributing to the moral foundation that's going to continue in not just our society, but any society, because these are all the variables, of the values, all the virtues that make societies great.
Good stuff. I guess I have one more question. We talk about the past, and if we think of the past as the first half of the football game or of a soccer match, that was 39, 38 years ago, whenever that was, 40 years ago. And we see where we're at now, see where you're sitting, and you're probably in the second half of the football game or soccer match. We won't say where at, but somewhere in that. What gets you excited about the future of this ministry, the platform, the opportunity that people have to step into, to learn, to be in GFCI community? What's one thing that, or a couple things that get you excited about the future?
Podcasts.
Okay, yeah.
Simply because this is a medium that's going to reach so many people with so much hope, and that hope is going to translate into direction, is going to translate into vision, is going to translate into knowledge that will lead to understanding, that will lead to that wisdom. So I think we live in a time when we're reaching more people through communication. Now that, on the flip side, that's one of the greatest challenges that young families have, because you get a smorgasbord of all opinions, and so we're competing against so many other worldviews. But we have a track record in growing families of what we have produced, and for us, and I think for a lot of our families, that's why it continues to grow, because there's an attractiveness to the conclusion, and people want what they see because it's morally refreshing. So that's one thing.
Well, the other, I think I'd answer, I'm trying to remember what the question was. But the thing that excites me is, because we've been around for a while, and now we are seeing those earlier generations, those children are now all parents, and some becoming grandparents, and to see their children wanting to follow through and to carry forth with what they've learned. Because, as I've often shared with young moms, in that Proverbs 31, they rise up and call her blessed. Don't expect that from necessarily your 5, 10, or maybe even your 15-year-old. But once they get out into the real world, usually it's within their first semester or so, if they go on to the university or even in a job, that they begin to see, oh, wow, this is why my parents taught me to do this.
There's a lot of decisions to be made.
There are. And so they begin to see the value that's there. But parenting is long term. And the other thing we've tried to encourage parents as well is, yes, we have maybe 18, 20 years to influence them under our roof. And it goes kind of back to the whole friendship idea. If you look at it, all things being equal, you have like 50, 60 years ahead of that to be their friend and to be a good relationship with them. So don't just view those first 15, 18, 20 years that you have, but look long term.
Long term. Yep.
What a good perspective. Yeah, really good.
And when you look long term, you can start building hope.
Exactly.
It's not as hopeless.
Right. It's not.
There are day-to-day events that make it hard, but if you have a long-term vision and keep working towards that, you can have hope for an amazing outcome.
Amen.
So, all right. Well, thanks, guys. It's been great.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you for listening to the Growing Families Life Parenting Podcast. We hope you've been encouraged and strengthened in your role as a parent. In the show notes, you'll see links to the growingfamilies.life website, where you can find more information and resources, including videos, links to sign up for one of our online parenting classes, and information on how to connect with a contact mom. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love for you to consider subscribing so that you can get these episodes right when they come out. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, and that will help others find this resource. If you're enjoying the video format of this podcast, click subscribe to the Growing Families Life YouTube channel so that you'll see the episodes when they are posted. Thanks for listening.
And I'm just going to go. And then I'll figure out how to transition as we go here.
Okay.
I still host.
I'm just along for the ride. Let me think about that.
Because here, let me get this.
Oh my. No. How? Oh. Oh,
You gotta get it. You gotta get it.
I'm going to tear.
Oh, my
One's
God.
gonna see it.
I can see it right here.
Yeah, but don't
Well,
look at
aren't
it.
we close?
My support, my emotional support water. You can bring that up if you want in this episode about my emotional support water.
I think we'll pass on that.
Okay.
Yeah.